philosophy is not a fit activity for young men because they have not amassed a sufficient phalanx of particulars from which to draw their conclusions or make their generalizations. Pay attention to, yeah, good, that's the right way. What is it?
Pay attention to minor particulars. Take care of the little ones.
Comma, take care of the little ones. And third, what was the next?
No ideas but in things or facts.
Well, no ideas but in things, no ideas but in facts. Then what was the next?
Close to my nose.
Right, and what was next? What?
Clamp the mind down on objects.
Yeah, that was Williams. Those last three were Williams. Facts, things, and objects. Close to the nose, four. And Pound, natural object is always the... And then Pound also says direct treatment of the object. And then, paraphrasing, I think it's Zukovsky, vision, i.e. sight, is where the eye hits. Vision, i.e. sight. Vision, parenthesis, or sight, end parenthesis, is where the eye hits. Sight is where the eye hits, or vision is where the eye hits. So probably a couple more I'll think of later. Huh? I think he was no ideas but in things. No ideas but in things, clamp the mind down on objects, no ideas but in the facts, close to the nose. Carl Rakosi. By what particulars is he significant? By what particulars is he significant? Talking about if you're talking, looking at a person or trying to describe a person, or it could be a tree. By what particulars is this tree significant? By what particulars is he significant? So all these generalizations tend toward specificity, particularity, tangibility, corporeality, actuality as defined by what you can relate to with your six senses. Mind. I almost left that. I almost said five, but sight, sound, sound, smell, taste, touch. And then assuming that the mind is like a crystal ball, in which you have 5 ribbons in the mind, different colored ribbons, and they reflect into the crystal ball and recombine in the empty mind. And the mind doesn't have tactile sense, but it recombines the others. It might do other things, and there might be other theories, but just staying simple, staying as simple-minded as possible. What the mind can do with 5 senses, maybe recombine them, make a hydrogen jukebox. But it's still a hydrogen in a jukebox, so it's still tangibles of some sort or other. So, that's sort of the ground to begin with. Now, the Shakespeare poem is on page 219 of the Norton Anthology. In the middle of it is the middle of the page, line 19. Page 219, written in 1595, possibly, or 1598. A song from a play, Love's Labour's Lost. And it's just the middle of the page it will start. When icicles hang by the wall, and Dick the shepherd blows his nail. Does anybody know what that means? Dick the shepherd blows his nail. What? Yeah. cold. Dick the shepherd blows his nail. What page was that? And when milk comes frozen home and pale. No, and Tom bears logs into the hall, and milk comes frozen home and pale. When blood is nipped and ways be foul, then nightly sings the staring owl to woo, to whip, to woo, a merry note, while greasy Joan doth kill the pot. Kill means stir the pot. When all aloud the wind doth blow, and coughing drowns the parson's saw. Saw, you know, is wise saying. So the parson is giving a speech, preaching, and everybody's coughing, and they have colds and blowing their nose. Coughing drowns the parson's saw, and birds sit brooding in the snow. Tragic line. Birds sit brooding in the snow. That was Kerouac's favorite line in Shakespeare. And birds sit brooding in the snow. And Marion's nose looks red and raw when roasted crabs hissed in the bowl. Then nightly sings the staring owl to woo, to whip, to woo, a merry note while greasy Joan doth kill the pot. So, without having said it, we've got the generalization, winter. The title is winter, but without having had this, I think that's the title is probably put in by the editor of the anthology rather than by Shakespeare. So we presented winter with a series of tangible, corporeal, sensory, tactile, sensible, actual, directly treated, visible, fact, minute, particular, phalanx of particular specificities, facts, close to the nose, close to the nose, absolutely close to the nose. Dick the shepherd blows his nail, close to the nose. As another exercise he does spring, when daisies pied and violets blue, and lady smocks all silver white, and cuckoo buds of yellow hue, do paint the meadows with delight. The cuckoo that on every tree mocks married men. For thus sings he, cuckoo, 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 oh word of fear, unpleasing to the married ear. Actually, even the little generalization at the end, daisies pied and violets blue, that's obvious. It's colors of the flowers. Lady smocks, or little silver white flowers. Cuckoo buds, he's being fanciful, but he's directly describing actual flowers. Paint the meadows with delight. Okay, there's a little generalization there. Then there's this long thing, the cuckoo then on every tree mocks married men, for thus is, well, for the bird sing, the cuckoo is apparently in this case symbolic of cuckoldry. Because, somebody's fucking your wife, unpleasing to the married ear. Still, it's springtime, everybody gets a hard on in springtime, so he's still presenting a function, a process, a fact, a whole phalanx of particulars here, rather than abstract generalizations. Talk about how the sex rises in the springtime. And as well, in the end, the nightly sings in the winter, and nightly sings the staring owl to whip, to woo, a merry note. What else you can do in wintertime is go upstairs and fuck. Yeah? To woo, to woo, to whip, to woo, to whip, that is, to whip, that is, to woo, go up, a merry note, while greasy Joan does fuck. So in winter, go upstairs and fuck, and in summer, find somebody else's wife and do it in the meadow or something. But in any case, what I meant, the whole point of this was that the little burden or refrain or musical tag lines at the end of these absolutely solid, factual phalanx and particulars are also kind of particular presentation, presentation of a situation in fact rather than a cookie abstract generalization. Does that make sense? I'm pointing out the unconscious fact underneath to whip, to woo, and cuckoo, cuckoo. What function they serve in presenting more fact. I just thought it up now. Anyway. The cuckoo then on every tree mocks merry men. When shepherds pipe on oaten straws, and merry larks are ploughmen's clocks. That's pretty good. Who wakes the ploughman to get up, or tell him when to, presumably when he wakes him to get up? The lark, singing at the break of day. The lark that sings at heaven's gate, rising. Lark of the morning. So merry larks are ploughmen's clocks. That was the song of the lark. This noise of the lark wakes up the farmer to go to his plowing. When turtles tread, turtle doves mate, tread is mate. And rooks and daws and maidens, when turtles tread and rooks and daws also mate. And maidens bleach their summer smocks, the cuckoo then on every tree, etc. So he's presented summer and he's presented winter with a phalanx of particulars, with a bunch of facts. Does that make sense? Does anybody object to this method of writing poetry by Shakespeare? Does anybody feel that it's insufficiently poetic, or the basic form, or that it evades some divine principle of visionary insight that you alone have? And I'm going to lay on so it's common, I think there's one or two in here that are holding out for something worse, another universe. Should we discuss that, or is there really an objection to what I'm doing?
Do you think that's the only valid poetry then, citing particulars?
Well, that's a generalization.
Okay.
I'm saying there's lots of poetry that's like that. Or most poetry, enormous amount of poetry is like that. And for us beginning students, including me, let's begin somewhere real where we can begin, instead of somewhere up in the air where we can't begin at all. If we have nowhere we can stand, then there's no point in my standing here. I mean, if there's no place, specific, no place with feet and a floor and carpets and senses, then it's hardly possible to talk.
But since you bring the sixth sense into it, is the opposite extreme, or the opposite, where are you going? I mean, something like Kerouac's mystical descriptions in Big Sur.
Give me, for instance.
For instance, is where he's having the DTs and he's just tripping through a sort of a Dantean level of hell, and he's writing.
You have to get the text and bring up the text, because you'll find, especially Kerouac. Oh, the other axiom, Kerouac, quote, details are the life of the novel, unquote. Details are the life of the novel. And he means just details like we've been talking about. You probably find that in the more hallucinated parts of Big Sur, there are hallucinations made of very specific details, like the giant, horrific hard-on on a mule, something like that, which is very clearly described and made, in such red.
He's describing vividly slow, grinding sex actions of.
Get the text and we'll look at word by word whether it's something way up in the air or whether this hallucinatory vision is composed of little specific noticing.
Oh yeah, it's really specific and concrete, is it?
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Like Shakespeare describing.
That's what I'm talking about. That's all I'm talking about. That even if you're going to have a vision, you've got to present it in concrete terms, with minute particulars, details, specifics, recombinations of sensory. Okay? You had you were saying something.
Well, if you include mine as well.
I didn't mean you. Go on ahead and say it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then what doesn't that, I was confused about what you were saying, but just clarify what you were saying.
Oh, I said before, mind, the crystal ball will recombine all the colors of the other senses. You make combinations. And the mind is an immense computer anyway. So it can take all those details and break them down into units and bits and reconstruct them like cut-ups. Make all sorts of amazing things. But just for sanity's sake and for good poetry's sake, see, the purpose of this course is not to study literature, but to, not to study literature for a literature course, but to provide you with some usable insight into your own writing. So that's why I'm beginning to lay down at the very beginning, stay real. Stick with reality if you want to write unreal poetry. Start off with some reality. because there's always I found here in Naropa and all over, in dealing with younger poets and older poets, that mediocrity is generally lack of specificity, and lack of minute particular detail, lack of outline, as Blake would say, outline, definite outline. So, that was Shakespeare. And we'll get back to that later. And not that all poetry's got to be just that. It's just that there's got to be that ground to begin with. Or that should be borne in mind as a basic direction for your own writing. Now, in modern days, there was a theory of imagism, as it was called. There was a theory called imagism and other objectivism, American Poetics, and American poetry development, that tried to get down to specifics and tried to follow up the theories that I just mentioned. And so I'll read a couple little samples of famous or well-known modern poets who've written in this way, not with rhyme, just direct treatment of the object. The wind blows the rain into our faces as we go down the hillside, upon rusted cans and old newspapers, past a tree on whose bare branches the boys have hung iron hoops, until we reach at last the crushed earthworm stretched and stretching on the wet sidewalk. What is unusual about that is that, it's a good enough description of an old lot in the rain, rusted cans and old newspapers. Pretty nearly anybody can write that. Oh, this was written in 1920 probably, when it was unusual to allow your mind to think about rusty cans as part of poetry. That was a big discovery. But beyond the rusty cans, past a tree on whose bare branches the boys have hung iron hoops. That's pretty interesting. Like a haiku, almost some exercise of poetic imagination on the part of the. You might go. Please go get chairs.
Get some chairs.
Yes, and settle in. It'll be easy.
Who's that poem by?
Charles Reznikoff. Poems 1918-1936. Volume 1, The Complete Poems of Charles Reznikoff. Black Sparrow Press.
Would that be required text for the course?
Well, if you want to learn how to write poetry, I would say so. Not for the course. But I would say it's one of the best handbooks you could. Who asked? Yeah. I would say it's one of the best handbooks you could check out. In previous terms and courses, I've used this, and William Carlos Williams has collected earlier poems, just as grounding for beginners and for advanced students. It's really worth reading. If you can't find it, send it. So he's got the bare branches where the boys have hung iron hoops, which is like a little stretch of imaginative noticing. It's a little beyond just rusty cans. It's actually a little like a haiku, some magical little action by the kids, where they've hung iron hoops on the bare branches and left them. And the guy walks by in the empty lot and sees them. So it's some kind of athletic poeticism there. Until we reach at last, what? The crushed earthworm stretched and stretching on the wet sidewalk. And that's really uncanny. Because we've all seen that after the rain. Because remember, it began, the wind blows the rain in our faces. We've all seen that after the rain, but hardly anybody has had the poetic presence of mind to write that down. Although it's sort of elemental, and it's also, it's as big as the atom bomb in terms of ecological weirdness. Because, this particular phenomena of earthworms on the sidewalk, stretching, on the wet sidewalk, is a wholly new, a wholly new phenomena. It's, probably only in the last 2,000 years have people noticed that. Usually the earthworms are in their earth or in their natural place, but there's lawns, and then there's sidewalks, and then there's a little grass margin by the roadside, and then there's worms lost on this path. You might have had them on precipices and rocks in Yellowstone, but this particular very urban or suburban haiku, or this suburban event, miracle, whatever, poetic freak, this suburban freak of nature, earthworms stretching on the wet sidewalk, crushed earthworms. It tells you it's the story of the earthworm and of life itself, but it's also this particular civilization that's sketched, like a fast Cézanne sketch, like where he's got Mont-Saint Victoire, it's just a couple of lines and a couple of colors, Cézanne watercolors. Late Cézanne, it's all reduced to just by what particulars is this mountain significant? By what particulars is he significant? You following? By what particular standout optical angles, colors? These days, the papers in the street leap into the air or burst across the lawns. Not a scrap but has the breath of life. These in a gust of wind play about. Those for a moment lie still and sun themselves. The first line was, these days the papers in the street leap in the air or burst across the lawns. It's also a very modern noticing. Carlos Williams has a very similar poem. Does anybody know that about The Term, it's called? The Term. A rumpled sheet of brown. Did everybody get the last poem? Anybody space out on it or miss it? It's about wind. I'll read it again. These days, the papers in the street leap into the air or burst across the lawns. Not a scrap, but has the breath of life. These in a gust of wind play about. Those for a moment lie still and sun themselves. This is a little anthropomorphic projection on it, but it's a really good description. The Term, probably written around the same year, because they were friends, Charles Reznikoff and William Carlos Williams. A rumpled sheet of brown paper about the length and apparent bulk of a man was rolling with the wind slowly over and over in the street as a car drove down upon it and crushed it to the ground. Unlike a man, it rose again, rolling with the wind over and over to be as it was before. Pretty funny. So there too. So this one, these were play about. These for a moment lie still and sun themselves. The two guys were, were like scientists observing phenomena, the same phenomena, but very particular phenomena with particular descriptions. So more Reznikoff, a few more. Walk about the subway station in a grove of steel pillars. How their knobs, the rivet heads, unlike those of oaks, are regularly placed. How barren the ground is, except here and there on the platform, a flat black fungus that was chewing gum. Has everybody seen that on pavements? The flat black fungus that was chewing gum. Has anybody here ever written about it? Or has anybody here ever read a poem about it? And how many times have you seen that in your 20th century existence? It's, just part of our ordinary everyday experience. Every day we see it. Somebody did write a poem about snot under the desk. I have seen a poem like that one of the students did last year. Well, coming up the subway stairs, I thought the moon only another street light, a little crooked. The white gulls hover above the glistening river where the sewers empty their slow ripples. That's pretty good, because the gulls are after the detritus in the sewers. The white gulls hover above the glistening river. It's real pretty there. Where the sewers empty their slow ripples. After rain. The motor cars on the shining street move in semicircles of spray. Semicircles of spray. He liked it so much he repeated it. Everybody seen that at one time or other? The motor cars on the shining street move in semicircles of spray. Semicircles of spray. After rain, so the street's flooded. If a naturalist came to the suburb, if a naturalist came to this hillside, he'd find many old newspapers among the weeds to study. This smoking morning, do not despise the green jewel shining among the twigs, because it is a traffic light. About the railroad station as the taxicabs leave, the smoke from their exhaust pipes is murky blue, stinking flowers, budding, unfolding over the ruts in the snow. This maybe is the best, actually. If there is a scheme, perhaps, come on in, it's all right. If there is a scheme, perhaps this, too, is in the scheme. As when a subway car turns on a switch, the wheels screeching against the rails, and the lights go out, but are on again in a moment. Has everybody had that, been in the subway and had that happen? Everybody not been in the subway? Well, it happens in subways. It's a very good. If there is a scheme, perhaps this too is in the scheme, as when a subway car turns on a switch, the wheels screeching against the rails and the lights go out, but are on again in a moment. That's so archetypal of an experience in New York that it's amazing it's not written about more, but this was, I guess, first notated in the 20s. When the sky is blue, the water over the sandy bottom is green. They have dropped newspapers in it. They have dropped newspapers on it, cans, a bed spring, sticks and stones. But these the patient waters corrode. Those are patient moss covers. There's a pretty picture of the patient moss. Okay, so that's a little touch of Reznikoff clamping his mind down on objects, being actual, and then a few samples of William Carlos Williams doing more or less the same. Actually, doing more or less the same as Shakespeare here. New books of poetry, it's called a coronal. New books of poetry will be written. New books in unheard of manuscripts will come wrapped in brown paper. And many a time the postman will blow and sidle down the leaf-plastered steps, thumbing over other men's business. But we, meaning the poets of this time, we ran ahead of it all. One coming after could have seen her footprints in the wet and followed us among the stark chestnuts. Her is spring, the goddess of spring, I think. It's like the Shakespeare line. Anemones sprang where she pressed, and cresses stood green in the slender source. And new books of poetry will be written, leather-colored oak leaves, many and many a time. He's just saying, like, spring will come, and people will be writing. People also will be springing. People also will have their mental, emotional, literary springs.
What's the title of that
a coronel, C-O-R-O-N-A-L. I sent him a book of poem wrapped in a brown manuscript too. That's why I noticed this poem years later. With a sinking heart. New books of poetry will be written. New books in unheard of manuscripts will come wrapped in brown manuscript. So, just a couple of little things for those who. To a poor old woman, munching on a plum on the street, a paper bag of them in her hand. They taste good to her. They taste good to her. They taste good to her. You can see it by the way she gives herself to the one half sucked out of her hand, comforted, a solace of ripe plums seeming to fill the air. They taste good to her. Late for summer weather. He has on an old light gray fedora. She, a black beret. He, a dirty sweater. She, an old blue coat that fits her tight. Gray flapping pants, red skirt, and broken down black pumps. Fat, lost, ambling nowhere through the upper town, they kick their way through heaps of fallen maple leaves, still green, and crisp as dollar bills. Nothing to do. Ha-cha. Proletarian portrait. A big, young, bare-headed woman in an apron, her hair slicked back standing on the street, one stockinged foot toeing the sidewalk, her shoe in her hand, looking intently into it. She pulls out the paper insole to find the nail that has been hurting her. So, okay, that's Williams. Now, I want to skip on to a modern poet called David Cope, who's about 30 years old, who writes very much specifically in this tradition of minute particular specificity, ordinary mind reality. And I, for various reasons, I'm reading through all of his poetry right now, which consists of little funny, handmade, homemade, mimeographed books of poems that he's put out. The first one I got was C-O-P-E, was The Stars by David Cope, copyright 1974, Nada Press. It was sent to me from Nada Press /bar Big Scream Magazine. Big Scream, 696 48th Street, Southeast Grand Rapids, Michigan. And then I liked the poems and I wrote them and got a couple more copies, and then every year he sent me a new book. So, and it was 1978. This is 1976. I think 5, 6, 7, 8. Blue Poems, February 78. Neon Eyes. True Love. May 77. Poems, 1979. Then a few poems I got in the mail the other day. This is more or less what he thinks he looks like. Actually, he looks much more mild than that. He makes his own drawings. Just like you. So what I would like to do now for the rest of this meeting, what time is it now? You're up till 9:30. Is read you through the complete works of David Cope, or selected, not everything. Just what I was reading this for was to look through his work and find what was tangible, in the sense that I've been preaching. He is influenced by Williams and Pound and Reznikoff, and included among these is a really beautiful elegy for Reznikoff. And in some respects, he's almost indistinguishable from their practice, which may seem imitative or a drag. But on the other hand, I don't know anybody else in the entire United States who can write like that clearly and that closely and that directly about ordinary mind, particular noticings, and make them magical through his attentiveness. In other words, the poetry and the magic, or the spiritual aura, comes from the quality of attentiveness. so that you see a thing so clearly that you see its relations to other things, and that's an advanced perception. It becomes an advanced perception, or an uncanny perception, the sort of thing that you might have on LSD. If you were looking at, like things rather than in clouds. Not faces in the clouds, but relations between dew drops and spider web and grass where it's hanging, and the flora and fauna. The microscopic observation of minute particulars rather than imaginary, daydreamy constructions. So for this particular quality of minute particularity, or close observation, I like David Cope. And actually, City Lights is publishing a selection of maybe about 30 pages of his. And so I was reading through to find what are the 30 best pages out of all this work. So I'll start reading. I've been looking over it over the last couple of years, and I checked out the ones I like. So I'd like to read some of them to you. His first book, called The Clouds, 74, I guess this is. The dark buildings, the yellow fog over the hills, rush hour, the angry drivers stuck at every exit. The ancient band leader leads a serenade while balancing on one foot. Old women still dream he's the one. Their white, fat arms reach for him as he staggers among the flying streamers. All night, the snow fell. In the yellow dawn, the white flashes across the fields. The white snow flashes across the fields. Already there are tracks heading into the sumac and sassafras. He didn't say heading into the woods, he said heading into the sumac and sassafras. And he also know he got up in the yellow dawn, he got up, look out the window. It's not well put, the white flashes. The white flashes across the fields, actually, is what it is, the white snow. The lineup. Arriving customers take a number. There is the expression of permanent boredom, the shuffling feet. Children are given dimes to start up the hobby horse. Yawns. Everyone stares at the floor or at the clerks. There are no conversations. A man walks off with a package. The jostling for his counter space begins. That's really amazing. The jostling for his counter space begins. So it's the quality of attention there. This is an ordinary scene that everybody's been in, except he has noticed children are given dimes to start up the hobby horse. He knew the name of the thing, the hobby horse, and that it cost a dime. A man walks over, but the jostling for his counter space begins. It's really an uncanny piece of awareness, this simple awareness and ability to get it down on a piece of paper. Not that it takes that much ability, but the ability is to be aware of so subtle a thing, or to notice it as an event of our own lives, an everyday event of our own life. The jostling for a counter space begins, for his counter. The ferry. The city lies wrapped in its mist. The iron cages of buildings rise through fogs and fumes. Actually, for a straightforward, realistic line, that's an amazing line. The iron cages of buildings rise through fogs and fumes. That might have come out of the Moloch section of Howell. It might have been written by Blake in the 20th century. The iron cages of buildings rise through fogs and fumes. The sky is clear and blue. The gulls plunge behind the boats. That's also a piece of noticing. The gulls plunge behind the boats. Generally, gulls do plunge in the fantail, looking for garbage. You don't very often see gulls plunging in the front or on the side of a boat. They generally go in the back. I don't know if he knew that, but he noticed something about where the gulls plunge. So it's actually an accurate contact with what's observable. The gulls plunge behind the boats. Gasoline slicks float out to sea, thick and iridescent, past mothballed carriers and garbage scows returning to the docks. Mothballed aircraft carriers.
Could you read it again?
Yep. The ferry. The city lies wrapped in its mist. The iron cages of buildings rise through fogs and fumes. The sky is clear and blue. The gulls plunge behind the boats. Gasoline slicks. The gulls plunge behind the boats. Gasoline slicks float out to sea, thick and iridescent, past the mothballed carriers and gasoline slicks float out to sea, thick and iridescent, past mothballed carriers and garbage scows returning to the docks. It's really packed in. It's got a whole, there's a ferry ride, it's got the whole, it's like a little Chinese painting, with a few swift sketches, a tremendous amount of subtlety and knowledge of nature, like the gulls plunging behind the boats, the mothballed carriers. The iridescent gasoline slicks is a little bit like the fungus that once was chewing gum. It's an archetypal thing that you see on streets even. Empty street. The yellow flashers point away to the left. An empty street. A vacant lot with steps leading up nowhere. The sumacs are lush and tall. Up the hill we see old hotels, gray unpainted buildings with rooms to rent. And above these, the sunset through the clouds, scarlet lining the broken surfaces of gray. The wind blows old papers down the street. His hair blown upward, an old man leans against a no parking sign, grinning without teeth. Empty street. Empty street, empty mouth. This is so closely related to Williams's practice or Reznikoff's method that it's amazing. And you could say the guy's just imitating, except that you can't imitate that. You have to actually use your perceptions. You have to go back to organic nature. You can imitate their method, but it isn't so much imitation as actually practicing their method. It's like saying, "Oh, you're just imitating Buddha" when you sit and do. If you're sitting and doing meditation practice, you could also be accused of imitating Buddha. In fact, there is a poem by Ryokan saying, "Well, all I'm doing is sitting imitating Buddha." Yes, he is imitating, but he's imitating something so elemental that it involves his own eyeballs and his own sense perceptions and his own basic mind. So I'd say it's if you could possibly succeed at imitating this style of writing, you're writing something universal, clearly. You don't even have to worry about imitating in that sense. All the hip people hurry into the bars. It's a cold, rainy night. Over the street light, black clouds move slowly. Gusts of wind blow the signs up and up. That's not so important. But over the street light, black clouds move slowly. There's a kind of uncanny space reality. The evidence. For 7 months, the Central City Police Department, the Central City PD actually, for 7 months, called The Evidence. For 7 months, the Central City PD has kept a 2-inch long piece of human ear in a freezer while the state prepares its case against the man who bit it off. The assailant and his victim were friends, out for a night on the town. Late in the night, a fight erupted. One kneed the other in the groin. They threw beer bottles at each other across the barroom and finally came to fisticuffs. When the police separated them, the unusual bit of evidence was found on the floor. January. The clear red light of dawn. Snow falls in the sunlight. The air shines with crystals. This is real simple. It's almost like a little haiku. It's not quite pointed, sharp as a haiku, but there is some perception there that's interesting. Snow falls in the sunlight. The air shines with crystals. That particular fairy scatter of light and from crystal all over the air is not very often been reported in poetry. There's probably something in Shakespeare. Say that. You know what he's talking about. Snow falls in the sunlight. It's dawn. Clear red light of dawn. Snow falls in the sunlight. The air shines with crystals. I don't think he's really got it down clearly enough, but it at least approaches a particular perception that almost everybody's had who's lived in the North. Prophecy. Well, two prophecies. One, Ford arranges his news conference in the library with a fire. He wants it to seem like FDR. Today, he prophesies a tax break. He calls for the end of the recession. He calls for the end of recession. Two, the coach. The Steelers are going to win because they're hungry. The Steelers are going to win because they didn't have no breakfast today. It's called two prophecies. The juxtaposition is funny too. One is President Ford with a news conference. He prophesies a tax break. He calls for the end of the recession. Actually, what's funny about that is it's really a very precise, humorous pointing out the absurdity and fatuousness of Ford's propositions merely by repeating them, by taking detail. Today he prophesies a tax break. He calls for the end of recession. It's obviously as hot air. And he doesn't have to say it's hot air. See, no ideas but in things. All you have to do is put the thing down, and it stands out stark in its own obviousness. Another corollary, say, to the natural object is always the adequate symbol. The corollary is by Trumpa here, Chugam Trumpa. Things are symbols of themselves. They stand out in their own stark obviousness, that is to say. If you see them, so it's the quality of your own attentiveness and perception, and grounding your mind on objects, clamping your mind on objects, and focusing your attention single-mindedly. That makes it possible for you to see things as symbols of themselves without need for things being a symbol of something else. To see a tree stand in its own eternal form in the space of eternity, all it requires is to forget about eternity and just take a look at the tree very clearly. Like as follows. Thousands of opera goers spill into the street. A clatter of footsteps, shouting at taxi drivers. And here's a more mysterious one. We sleep. There are engines, hoarse shouts, a procession, half in shadow, moving along the street. I'll start again. We sleep. There are engines, hoarse shouts, a procession, half in shadow, moving along the streets. Does anybody know what that is? Because I haven't been, it's something. It's an accurate description of something, and I haven't been able to figure it out. We sleep. It's like a riddle. I think there's a riddle. We sleep. There are engines.
Talk about it's night, and you're not aware of what's going on, but life is still going
No. You're missing the whole point. It has to be, it's not a generalization at all he's interested in. It's probably a fire engine. I'm trying to figure what kind of engine. Not life is going on. Oh, Jesus, I've been talking for an hour without making any... No! Okay. We sleep. There are engines, hoarse shouts, a procession half in shadow moving along the streets. H-O-A-R-S. 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 No, I think it's literally people shouting. And I figured it may be sometimes. That might be garbage collectors. But what's interesting about that poem is that there's something real going on, something ordinary, like either a fire engine or fire, and maybe the block darkened, burnt out or something, or garbage collectors. It seems to be the closest to I mean, see, what is the whole point I was trying to make was something real rather than a generalization. In fact, I'm just not interested in generalization, and I don't think the human mind is either. It may be that this civilization, which is bent on suicide, has gotten itself up into a place where it can't subsist on anything except the food of generalization, and that's why it has cancer and is about to blow itself up. But just sort of keeping the mind down to what's real rather than
read it again.
We sleep. Well, I'll read the one before, so that because there are three poems called music. The first I didn't think was so good, so I didn't read it. But since that last one is so mysterious, maybe the other two will cast light on it. The title, Music. 1. A group of children walks through Central Park, teaching the world to sing in perfect harmony. 2. Thousands of opera goers spill into the street, a clatter of footsteps, shouting at taxi drivers. 3. We sleep. There are engines, hoarse shouts, a procession, half in shadow, moving along the streets. The engines? Where's he sleep? Literally, he's sleeping. I mean, he wakes in his sleep, I guess. Thousands of opera goers spill into the street, a clatter of footsteps, shouting at taxi drivers. Maybe I'll write him and ask him. Why not? Ask the Delphic Oracle. I'll write him. Find out what it is. It's very suggestive. Because it's just almost on the surface of obviousness, but it isn't quite. And it may be that's why it's so interesting, is that he has actualities there. Engines, horse shouts, procession, half in shadow, but he doesn't, it's just left under the surface. It doesn't have to become labeled. Ornament. Only $4.95. This beautiful ornament. Ornament is the title. Only $4.95. This beautiful ornament actually chirps like a bird. That's the whole poem. That's really great. Lover's dream. They woke together and found themselves, so now he's dealing with more impalpable material, a dream. They woke together and found themselves in a small white room. There was one window, and out the window fog hanging over the skeletal city. An official began haranguing them. He forced them to write on pieces of paper. He sang to them and pleaded that they cooperate. When they moved to the window to see the fog, he became angry and claimed they had ruined everything. Shopping Plaza. We are in row A7. The landscape of cars extends out of sight. It is a gray evening. Small groups of people hurry into the stores, taking their plans out. Their footsteps sound hollow over the asphalt. Now they are gone. There's the emptiness of the wind. Just a little description. The Riot. Housewives line the route from the airport. When the senator arrives, they begin spitting and shouting. Signs denounce his stand on the busing of black children. He is calm, but doesn't stay around to talk. The women and their men are pounding the windows as he walks through the corridor. The police are called in and resort to tear gas. That's really good. Because very few people can write political poetry or use newspaper generalization or abstraction. So this looks like he was actually on the spot. Women and the men are pounding the windows as he walks through the corridor. That's really a modern what? Airport, supermarket, something, piece of construction. Cemetery. Over the headstones there are naked branches through which we see the lighted windows of the office buildings rising out of the mist. Just like a little Chinese landscape. This is a poem, I guess the title, he got his idea for his title of his press. He had this little press called Big Screen, or a magazine. So this poem is called Big Screen. Ivy grows out of the balding head of the university intellectual. His hands sprout wands. He feels light as air. He finds himself dancing. Suddenly he is a satyr prancing over an ashen landscape. As he looks down, his legs turn to ashes. He begins screaming, "My books, my library, my PhD, all my ambitions." Huh? Yeah. Well, it's some sort of a fancy thing, or maybe daydreaming thing. He looks, a satyr prancing over the ashen landscape. Down on the farm. The cows stare at us with sad, empty eyes. A fat man approaches us, saying, "There's a lot of hamburger on the roof, ha-ha." 3. The woods have not been touched. They are moist and ancient. It's called Down on the Farm. The woods have not been touched. They are moist and ancient. The thick trunks go up high. The woods have not been touched. They are moist and ancient. The thick trunks go high up without branches. Silence. My breathing, the air entering and leaving my lungs. It's not too spectacular, but it's an interesting moment of perception where the person, the perceiver, becomes aware of sort of the space around and maybe some detail in the space and himself as part of the impersonal space, just breathing. And there is a poem by Williams that I always like that. Those of you who've been in classes with me probably have heard it any number of times. It's called Thursday, 202. Thursday, page 202, collected earlier poems of Williams. I'll read Cope's again. The woods have not been touched. They are moist and ancient. The thick trunks go high up without branches. Silence. My breathing, the air entering and leaving my lungs. Williams is Thursday. I have had my dream, like others, and it has come to nothing, so that I remain now carelessly with feet planted on the ground and look up at the sky. Feeling my clothes about me, the weight of my body in my shoes, the rim of my hat, air passing in and out of my nose, and decide to dream no more. Williams is a lot more complete. That moment of perception in Williams is more complete. I guess almost everybody's had it, of being reduced to, say a moment of being reduced to no ideas, but actually just standing there breathing, or lying in bed as a kid, following your breath. Or, say, coming to total catastrophe and emotional bankruptcy and taking refuge in the Buddha and sitting down on a pillow and meditating. In any case, an archetypal experience, whether you're a Yankee pragmatic follower of William James or an Oriental specialist. Thursday. I have had my dream, like others, and it has come to nothing, so that I remain now carelessly with feet planted on the ground and look up at the sky, feeling my clothes about me, the weight of my body in my shoes, the rim of my hat, air passing in and out at my nose, and decide to dream no more. Well, any of you that do any meditation practice will understand what he means by "and decide to dream no more." And I guess you could figure it out any way you need to go. My breathing, the air entering and leaving my lungs. Good old David Cope. Traffic Island. The deep Ohio night is silent and fogged. Cars head down the ramp. Travelers sleep, sitting up in their cars. The faint odor of smoke hangs in the air in the service center. This faint odor of smoke hangs in the air. In the service center, country music twangs and blares. A fat, 40-ish woman sits and preens, her eyes rimmed in black. Small children rub their eyes, stare out the windows as if expecting a sunrise. Reddish clouds, the white sky. The end isn't very good. It's just that faint odor of smoke hangs in the air. In a traffic island. I guess that's a highway traffic island where you stop and maybe go and take a piss, get a map. A faint odor of smoke hangs in the air. In the service center, country music playing. So that was his first book. That's quite a lot of perception. And the second book got even better, I thought, called The Stars. So I'm going to read you. Is this interesting? Is it uninteresting to anyone? Yes.
I wonder if his style sort of puts the poet in the position of being an observer rather than a creator. Instead of things coming out of the mind or the poet simply reflects what he sees.
I think it's a semantic question, actually. I mean, it's very, well, he doesn't simply reflect what he sees, because you have to pick out something to see. Or, I mean, something is picked out to see. You don't write about everything you see. Otherwise, you'd have thousands and thousands of pages all the time. It's only those selected moments of perception that are particularly your attentiveness. So, creator in the sense of, it's an outline of his particular sensibility, which would be unlike anybody else's, really. He would see his things and somebody would see their things. Of course, there are combinations in here which take it beyond just being observed. But even so, I would say if you could achieve being an observer, you'd be doing something good. Because I don't know if anybody in here is going to be able to write any decent poetry to begin with. So if you can just about, get yourself over the edge of reality to see what's there to begin with, then there might be a possibility of going on and recombining it in a more romantic form. But you can't go do that unless you've got legs to stand on and ground to stand on and perceptions to realize. And so I'm just reading this as a demonstration of actual perceptions that are realizable by anybody, so that anybody really can write poetry or begin writing poetry if they'll at least start with something real. Yeah.
The question reminds me of the question, is photography an art?
Yeah. It's a form. You said this form of poetry. This is a form of poetry. It's not the only form of poetry, by any means. The reason I began with Shakespeare was to point out that one element in common between Cope, Williams, Reznikoff, and Shakespeare. When icicles hang by the wall, and Dick the shepherd blows his nail, and Tom carries the wood into the hall, and milk comes frozen home and pale, and Marion's nose is red and raw. Just the simple facts, close to the nose, the facts. No ideas but the facts. Shakespeare's got it as the basis of his intelligence, or as the ground from which he can, make something prettier. The nightly sings the staring owl to woo. But at least he's got the grounding. So I'm talking here in our first class about the grounding from Shakespeare to the 20th century. The grounding in some kind of actuality that everybody knows and everybody can see. And only schizophrenics refuse to acknowledge as part of a common, simple, self-evident reality. Just simple as that. Simple as that. Just to cut through the bullshit involved in the poetry business so that we get down to some place where everybody is at once, including the writer, the reader, and centuries of experience, so that you have some basis for writing poetry, and so it doesn't become a matter of bullshit, pure bullshit that has no correlative relationship to our everyday experience, or extraordinary experience. So this is not the only kind of poetry. It's just that poetry got to include facts, is all I'm saying. be combinations of perceptions and facts. Otherwise, what is it? It's words that have no reference to any psychological or physical or perceptible ground. No. You're looking a little dubious. Okay. I still would like to present all these texts because you'll very rarely see them in any case, or hear them. I'm probably the only one in 200 miles who's got all these books. So it's a rare matter. Man of no fortune and with a name to come. I'm beginning this whole course, which is a survey in English language poetry, in reverse by reading of the latest, the cream of the latest, rather than we just began a little with Shakespeare. Well, next time, you might start reading Pound's Seafarer for page 994. Seafarer. If you find any other anthologies which have a little bit of Piers Plowman, which is not in here, Joseph Langland's Piers Plowman, for that alliterative verse, you might check it out in some anthologies. I think
What was that title?
Piers Plowman. Piersplowman. William Langland. It isn't in the Norton anthology. You can find it in this if you see the Auden Pearson 5-volume Poets of the English Language. It's a really good survey of English poetry. Auden had a really intelligent mind, and it was a poet selecting poems. So there's a lot of little specimens of poetics in here that you won't find elsewhere. If you don't know it, it's just a great part of your armament as poets, if you're interested. The 5-volume Viking Press. It's now, I think, in paperback, if it's available. Poets of the English Language, edited by W.H. Auden and Norman Holmes Pearson. I settled on the Norton anthology as the biggest, thickest, cheapest. But the Auden anthology has a couple of interesting things. And you'll find some of Piers Plowman. It's a 14th century poem written in alliterative verse. And Pound's translation of The Seafarer in the Norton Anthology on page 994 to 6 is similar. And why don't you just take a look through the early pages of the Norton Anthology. Just the lyric stuff, up to the popular ballads. Skip to Chaucer. Too thick and heavy for me to go into, except for a few lines. I want to stick mainly with lyric and musical lyric rather than heavier work. So if you skip to Chaucer, that's about 44 pages. So from page 3 to page 100 or so, just look in and out. Enjoy yourself over the next couple days. You don't have to read everything. Just read what attracts your eye. Skim. If you see pretty lines, follow them up. It's too much. I found myself over many, many years in reading poems and going to college that it was not really possible for me to pay attention to every poem that I was assigned. Or even pay attention completely to some poems that I thought were really great. I would find that just certain lines stuck in my mind, and I would read the same line. I got to read the poem, but so I go blank after 2 lines. But for God's sake, hold thy tongue and let me love. I'd remember that, and maybe the next 2 lines of the poem by Donne, and I still don't remember how it ended. So whatever sticks in your mind, whatever comes naturally, but at least run your eye over the page and look around with interest and curiosity at what's going on. So in other words, the assignment is about 60 pages of poetry there to zap through, and whatever amuses you. pay attention to and follow out. And later on in your life, you can go back and read the last stanza, or carefully examine the last stanza. You can do that. Just like a couple of things. Since I'm teaching, I'm going back and reading through poems that I know by heart, the first 6 lines or some line that I somehow never did read the rest of it. And I find that's pretty universal among intelligent readers. You just, absorb certain things and don't. So I wouldn't want to force on you anything I can't do myself. So. Walking, driving, everything is business, nothing is still. Across the river the city gleams. Voices roar in the metal traffic. That's pretty good. Voices roar in the metal traffic. This is an American poem, except no substitutes. No surrealism or symbolism. This is the asphalt under your feet. Well, I think you can say that very, accurately. It's great. This is the asphalt under your feet. This is like a declaration, an Americanist declaration, such as the 20s poets used to make. Baseball. No. 2 old friends appear out of the crowd, and we're standing in the rain yakking. Still, I've got to go. I'm going up the hill, wave them goodbye, turning to see their faces on a city bus, staring blankly into the misty city. It's a common experience, saying goodbye, and all of a sudden, after the moment of rapport, you look at your friends and they're like corpses. Baseball. The farm boy's proud of his white uniform with the red trim. Under the white lights, he and others play baseball. They're dazzling on the green. A hit! The crowd stands up, mouths full of popcorn. The ball goes high over the lights, disappearing over the bushes at the field's edge into the dark river beyond. So he's taken this little pop art moment and then made it into like a funny symbolic thing. On the other hand, he's stuck with disappearing over the bushes at the field's edge into the dark river beyond. So it's literal and at the same time it's symbolic. But he hasn't departed from the literality to make a little symbol of the degeneration of this red-trimmed joy. Or it's a little magical mystery tour of that. It's like a little mind jump. Is that obvious? Up front, the ball's lost. The ball, but also lost in lost in the mystery of the dark river beyond. It begins. The kid is proud of his white uniform. The farm boy is proud of his white uniform with a red trim under the white lights. He and the others play baseball. They're dazzling. It's also right on. Right, hitting the nail on the head. But at the end, disappearing over the bushes at the field's edge into the dark river beyond. It's also on the nose of reality, but at the same time, there's a funny magical thing that happens. Denise Levertov does that quite a bit too. Well, it's just that dazzling a hit. It's all this enthusiasm. All of a sudden, it all goes into death. It all goes into the dark river beyond. There is a dark river, I suppose, at the other end of the baseball field. It's sort of like a little magical twist in that, without the point. An old woman leans against a tree, alone in the cemetery, the wind at her back. Now she turns back to her car, the highway, home, coffee with friends. What's that? It begins leaning against a tree, alone in the cemetery. The highway, home, coffee with friends. It's perfect. Evening. A fisherman jerks his line. It goes taut. The eye of the fish, silver and shallow. He frees the hook. His knife opens the white belly. The guts spill onto the sand. What I liked about that was the eye of the fish, silver and shallow. That's one of the best descriptions of the eye of a fish I've ever seen. You've all bought fish from a fish store. You've all seen the eye of a fish, and it is silver, and it is shallow. And it's like just a really accurate phanopeic mind's eye picture description of a fish eye. Silver and shallow. The eye of the fish, silver and shallow. Perfect. Crash. The cars lie, one on its side, a rear wheel still spinning, and the other upside down. The bodies are scattered across the cornfield, bent and broken on the frozen ground. 2 ambulances pull up. The attendants arrange and cover the dead. Cars pull over to the side of the road. Everyone shuffles, eager to help, hands in pockets. Okay, so he's made a commentary on one's shock, numbness, selfishness, or inability, or whatever, but he hasn't had to make a comment. He just, everyone shuffles, eager to help, hands in pockets. No ideas but in things. He's got the idea across without having to make a generalization, just by hands in pockets. Eager to shuffles, hands in pockets. Lines of headlights extend to the horizon. Horns honking, flashing lights. And overhead, the high, thin poles are silhouetted. And overhead, the high, thin poles are silhouetted before the lavender sky. It's just a little Chinese painting again, but it's a very delicate one. Lines of headlights extend to the horizon. He lives around Detroit. It's Michigan where he's writing, actually. Lines of headlights extend to the horizon. It's almost like the Iliad in a way. There's a kind of classical monumentality to that. Lines of headlights extend to the horizon. Horns honking, flashing lights, and overhead the high, thin poles are silhouetted before the lavender sky. It's very delicate at the end. The evening streets are full of ghosts pleading for mercy. Sunset washes the windows red and they flash over the river. That's pretty spacious. The night comes on, all sirens and bowling tournaments. Detroit. Twilight. A white bar owner, thinking a black dude's breaking into his car, shoots him down in the asphalt lot. The bar's in flames. Patrons scatter. The sirens begin. Police arrive. And the crowd's all over the street chanting. Gas masks, electric megaphones, rifles, bottles, swinging clubs. It's fast. The whole television program. Twilight. I'll do it again. It's really swift and modern and completely... He's got the whole terror of that street scene. Fast. Detroit. Twilight. A white bar owner, thinking a black dude's breaking into his car, shoots him down in the asphalt lot. The bar's in flames. Patrons scatter. The sirens begin. Police arrive. And the crowd's all over the street chanting. Gas masks, electric megaphones, rifles, bottles, swinging clubs. Perfect. However, here's where the observation turns over into the uncanny almost. Something so subtle that it's uncanny. Waiting for a bus. It's called lunch hour. Waiting for a bus. Some laid-off workers shoot craps. That's a line. Some laid-off workers shoot craps. It's an amazing line for poetry. Some laid-off workers shoot craps. I mean, they never would have gotten away with it in 1890. They've insisted on the murmuring of innumerable bees and moaning of memorial doves and immemorial elms. In this case, it's some laid-off workers shoot craps. This one's one. Start again. Waiting for a bus. Some laid-off workers shoot craps. This one's one. He's dancing around, slapping at the losers. It's weird. But the picture is absolutely real. Waiting for a bus, some laid-off workers shoot craps. This one's one. He's dancing around, slapping at the losers. Is that familiar? Or is there anybody that doesn't understand that particular mood and picture of mania? Is it glee, a funny kind of glee? Some sort of dumb idiot glee. It's very familiar. It's an familiar American archetype. This one's once dancing around, slapping at the losers. Another, it's called Asphalt. Two men are shouting outside the courtroom, waving their arms, pointing to sheafs of paper clutched in their fists. Police appear and escort them out, still shouting, half dragged down the marble steps. It's apparently some lawyers arguing. Two men are shouting outside the courtroom, waving their arms, pointing to sheafs of paper clutched in their fists. Police appear and escort them out, still shouting, half dragged down the marble steps. It's like a Charlie Chaplin movie, silent movie. I mean, a lot of his technique is just a silent movie thing. It's 9:30. Should we continue, or do we have to go? Or anybody, you can leave. I'll go on. I'd like to read some more of it and get over with this. Get over with his work. The beating. The dreamers wake to screams. Down the corridor, a man is beating his wife. She runs into the night air. He follows, his fists crashing against her skull. Frightened by shouts, he runs to his car and takes off. A child is left, crying in the doorway. Throughout the area, lights go on. The police are summoned, and she is carried away, covered with blood. People huddle under the stars, speaking softly. Again, a good little description, sort of a short story description. The hat, the cane, the tailored suit, the open mouth, the polysyllabic terminology, quote unquote, the latest bestsellers, the hair combed and parted perfectly. This character sketch. The hat, the cane, the tailored suit, the open mouth, the polysyllabic terminology, the latest bestsellers, the hair combed and parted perfectly. Three drivers wait for their load. Their chatter pierces the brick wall. Beyond the wall, another chatters on the telephone. The morning sun. I guess this is a statement of his philosophy. Today, I have my yellow telephone and a vase of roses. These things are enough this morning, and the sun is bright through the window. So these things are enough this morning, would be his general take. And what happened? 1977. See if there's any special things that I noticed. End of the shift. Women stream out of the factory, swearing down the boss and the union. The shift is over. The long day inspecting and cleaning parts, swallowing pills, and shouting over the roaring fans. And though it's a bright afternoon, they hardly notice. Stumbling over the tracks below the expressways, they gossip and argue, worrying about traffic. When they get to their cars, they find them vandalized. Here a battery stolen, here a windshield smashed out, here the tires taken off, the radio ripped out. Till the end of the shift. Really awful. But it's true, you know. Moonlight in West Virginia. The full moon, pale yellow in the haze, floats above the mountains shining on stark rock, into crevasses where in dreams light would never shine. This road, sudden curves, traffic pitches downhill, dashes up, through a pass, round a bend, now in moonlight, now in shadow, headlights in our eyes for miles, then a stretch alone on the road. This peaceful light fills the whole car. Pretty solid. The old black woman. On the radio, we hear a conversation with an old black woman. She talks the old days, revival meetings, everyone gathered far from the road, going back in buggies, and after the praying, breaking out the watermelon, going up a greasy pole, chasing pigs, bringing the maypole down, and dancing at hoedowns, sitting in the shade, swatting flies. All this in a sweet voice full of humor. Coquina Beach. Tall, thin grass covers the dunes, and over the rise we find a worn keel, remains of a shipwreck. Beyond this broken wood, the crowd dozes up and down the beach. Breezes about me, and nearby, a middle-aged man whistles at a young girl, who marches away around a dune, her mouth in a pout. A dragonfly lands in the grass near me. A gull coasts above. What am I waiting for? Into the ocean, the salt on my tongue. Here he gets political. It's something interesting to see what he does with a larger subject. Arlington. At dawn, the guards and caretakers, still sleepy-eyed, yawn as cars begin to roll in. The parking lot's a circus, motor buses and tours, wide-eyed crowds racing through the graves. Two old women haggle about money. The young boy wonders when Daddy will take him home. Beyond the lot, over the Potomac, the Washington Monument is wrapped in mist, and I find myself staring at it a moment, lost in dreams of Rome and power. I've come here to see John Kennedy's grave. We wander through the acres of identical white stones, and up the hill we find the eternal flame, the ellipsis in stone. The record of his speech is clear thought. These wonder where his brother's grave must be, and these are in a hurry to see the tomb of the unknown soldier. One races by in a tractor. One shouts at his children who are climbing the walls. Staring into this flame and the scorched stone around it, I don't know where to turn. The sky is full of jets and military helicopters rushing somewhere. I recall my hopes and dreams, where we've been these years. The day grows full, our eyes full of tears. It's time to leave and go on. That's actually pretty good as a political comment without getting into an editorial. Simply saying, I recall my hopes and dreams, juxtaposed with the skies full of jets and military helicopters rushing somewhere. Well, it's getting late, so there's a lot more. What I'd like to do is well,
It is now 9:30, and we ask all students to leave the building. Thank you.
Okay, I'll finish it. The Crypt. Duke Chapel, Durham, North Carolina. Down the stairs, among white pillars, the air is cool. Silence. This is called the Crypt. A kneeling bench lies before the window, a golden cross, light falling all around it. The Bible is open to Matthew, forgiveness and a quiet heart. Now, the tourists enter, curious to see what is here. Okay, finish with that in a moment. I may continue with this and then go on to Piers Plowman.
I think I wrote that comment that we couldn't figure it out. I think it's Central Park South, 1 a.m.
Yeah.